Her knees hit the frozen wooden floor so hard she heard something crack. Maybe it was the boards. Maybe it was her heart. Josie Whitmore was 19 years old, and her own father had just shoved her down in front of every soul in Thatcher's General Store, offering her up like she was nothing but damaged goods. "Take her." Obadiah Whitmore slurred his breath, reeking of whiskey. "She's worth at least 2 bottles. Hell, I'll settle for 1. That was the day Josie learned her price, and the day a stranger decided she was worth more than any man could pay. Stay with me until the very end of this story. Subscribe to my channel and comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Josie's journey travels across the world. Bitter Creek, Wyoming Territory. December 1878. The cold bit through Josie's thin dress like teeth. She'd known something was wrong the moment her father grabbed her wrist that morning. His grip was too tight. His eyes were too wild. And the way he'd dragged her 3 miles through the snow without saying a word, that silence scared her more than any of his drunken rages ever had. "Pa, where are we going?" He didn't answer, just kept walking, his fingers digging into her arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Pa, please, Ma's medicine. We were supposed to get Ma's medicine today. The fever's getting worse, and she can't—" "Shut your mouth, girl!" Josie shut her mouth. She'd learned years ago that arguing with Obadiah Whitmore when he got like this only made things worse. So she stumbled along beside him, her worn boots slipping on the icy road, her breath fogging in the bitter December air. Bitter Creek appeared through the swirling snow like a ghost town. A handful of buildings huddled together against the cold, the church with its crooked steeple, the saloon that never closed, and Thatcher's General Store where Josie had bought thread and sugar and hope on better days. Today it looked like a courthouse. Inside. Obadiah shoved her toward the door. "And keep your head down. Don't want nobody thinking you're worth more than you are." The store was warm. That was the first thing Josie noticed, the heat from the pot-bellied stove wrapping around her frozen skin like a blessing. The second thing she noticed was the crowd. 6 townspeople had sought shelter from the cold. Mrs. Patterson was examining bolts of fabric near the window. The Dawson brothers lounged by the stove playing cards on a barrel top. Old Cornelius Thatcher stood behind his counter, his weathered face creased with suspicion the moment he saw who'd walked through his door. Everyone knew Obadiah Whitmore. Everyone knew what he'd become. Corny. Obadiah released Josie's wrist and swaggered toward the counter, his gait unsteady. "I need supplies, flour, salt, and whatever whiskey you got that ain't watered down." Cornelius's jaw tightened. "You got money, Obadiah, 'cause your credit's been dead longer than your reputation." "I got something better than money." Josie felt the words before she understood them. Felt her father turn, felt his hand close around her arm again, felt herself being yanked forward like a dog on a chain. "I got her." The store went silent. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Josie's face burned as every eye in the room turned toward her. She could feel their stares, curious, pitying, disgusted. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, counting the scuff marks on the wooden boards, trying to disappear into herself. "Obadiah." Cornelius's voice dropped low. "What in the name of God Almighty do you think you're doing?" "Making a trade, fair and square." Obadiah shook Josie's arm like he was showing off livestock at auction. "One girl, 19 years old, strong back, good teeth, knows how to cook, clean, sew, all that woman stuff. Take her off my hands, and we'll call my debt even." "You can't sell what's mine?" Obadiah laughed, and it was the ugliest sound Josie had ever heard. "She's my daughter Corny. I made her. I fed her. I kept a roof over her worthless head for 19 years. Seems to me I'm owed something for all that trouble." Mrs. Patterson pressed a hand to her mouth. One of the Dawson brothers muttered something under his breath. Cornelius gripped the edge of his counter so hard his knuckles went white. And Josie. Josie just stood there. Because what could she say? What could she do? Her father was right. She had no money, no property, no rights that any court would recognize. In the eyes of the law, she was barely more than the livestock he compared her to. Please! The words scraped out of her throat, small and broken. Pa, please don't do this. Ma needs me. She's burning up with fever, and if I'm not there to... Your ma's the reason we're in this mess. Obadiah's grip tightened until Josie gasped in pain. Useless woman can't even stay healthy. And you... He shoved her, and Josie stumbled, her foot catching on a loose board. She went down hard. Her knees cracked against the frozen wood. Her palms slammed flat splinters, driving into her skin. And still she didn't cry out because she'd learned long ago that crying only made him angrier. 19 years. Obadiah spat, standing over her. 19 years I put food in your mouth and clothes on your back. And what do I get? Nothing. Not a single thing. You're just deadweight girl. Always have been. That's enough. The voice came from behind them. Quiet. Steady. Cold as the wind outside. Josie didn't look up. She couldn't. Her vision was blurring, her chest heaving with the effort of holding back sobs. But she heard boots on the floorboards, heard the crowd shift and murmur, heard her father's sharp intake of breath. Who the hell are you? Name's Nathaniel Calloway. Ranch about 15 miles north. A pause. And I'm telling you to let that girl up. This ain't your business, Calloway. You made it everyone's business the moment you dragged her in here. Josie felt a presence beside her, felt someone crouch down entering her field of vision. She saw worn boots, faded canvas pants, a hand extended toward her calloused scarred across the knuckles, steady as stone. Miss. The voice was gentler now, meant only for her. Can you stand? She looked up. The man kneeling beside her had a face carved by hard years, weathered skin, a jaw that looked like it had been set in iron-gray eyes that held more sorrow than she'd ever seen in a single pair. Silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples. A scar cut across his left cheek, disappearing into his collar. He looked like a man who'd buried more than his share of hopes. Josie's voice wouldn't work. Her legs wouldn't move. Take your time. He didn't touch her, didn't grab her arm the way her father did. Just kept his hand extended, waiting. Whenever you're ready. Get away from her. Obadiah lurched forward, but one of the Dawson brothers stepped into his path, whether to help or just to see what happened next. Josie couldn't tell. She's my property, Calloway. You got no right. She's a human being. Nathaniel's voice stayed level, but something dangerous moved beneath the surface. Not property, not livestock, and she sure as hell isn't yours to sell. He stood slowly, putting himself between Josie and her father. He was taller than Obadiah by half a head, and broader across the shoulders. But it wasn't his size that made the difference. It was the way he held himself, like a man who'd seen violence, who knew how to deliver it, who was perfectly willing to do so if pushed. Now here's what's going to happen, Nathaniel said, and his voice filled the room without rising at all. I'm going to pay Corny here for whatever supplies your family needs. Medicine, food, whatever it takes. And then I'm going to walk out of this store. And your daughter, he glanced back at Josie still on her knees, is going to decide for herself whether she comes with me or stays with you. She doesn't get to decide. She does today. Obadiah's face went purple. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a long moment, Josie thought he might actually swing at this stranger, might start a brawl right here in Thatcher's store. But something in Nathaniel's eyes made him hesitate. You're making a mistake, Obadiah hissed. She's worthless. Can't do nothing right. You'll regret this inside a week. That's my concern, not yours. Nathaniel reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet, counting bills onto the counter, without taking his eyes off Obadiah. Josie watched the money stack up more than she'd seen in months, maybe years. Corny. Fever tonic, flour, salt, coffee. Whatever else you think a sick woman might need. Put it together for me. Cornelius hesitated only a moment before nodding and moving toward the back of the store. His hands were shaking slightly. So were Mrs. Patterson's, pressed against her chest like she was praying. "Get up, girl." Obadiah's voice made Josie flinch. She looked at her father, at this man who was supposed to protect her, supposed to love her, and saw nothing but contempt in his bloodshot eyes. "You walk out that door with him," Obadiah said low and mean, "and you're dead to me. You understand, dead. Don't you ever come crawling back." Josie stared at him. She remembered being 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders at the county fair, feeling like she could touch the sky. She remembered being 10, watching him shoe horses with steady hands and a patient smile. She remembered the day her mother first took sick, when he'd held Josie while she cried and promised everything would be all right. That man was gone. Had been gone for years. And the thing standing in front of her now, this creature made of whiskey and bitterness and broken dreams, wasn't her father anymore. "Ma," she whispered, "I can't leave Ma alone with you. Your Ma's dying anyway. Ain't nothing you can do about that." The words hit Josie like a fist to the chest. Her vision swam. Her hands shook against the cold floor. And then a different hand entered her sight. That same scarred hand extended once more, waiting with impossible patience. "Miss." Nathaniel's voice was quiet. "The medicine's for your mother. Whether you come with me or not, you're taking it to her. That's a promise." Josie looked at the hand, looked at the man behind it, looked at the father who'd just told her she was worthless dead weight, not worth keeping. She made her choice. Her fingers closed around Nathaniel's palm. His grip was warm and firm as he helped her to her feet, his other hand steadying her elbow when she swayed. He didn't grab, didn't pull, didn't hurt. He just helped. "Breathe," he said quietly. "You're all right now." But she wasn't all right. Her father had just tried to sell her for whiskey. Her mother was dying 3 miles away. And this stranger, this man she'd never met, had just paid for her like she was something to be bought. "I don't understand." Her voice came out raw, cracked. "Why would you do this?" Nathaniel's gray eyes met hers, and she saw something in them she couldn't name. Grief, maybe. Recognition. The look of someone who'd been broken and was still learning how to stand. "Because someone needed to," he said simply. "And I was here." Cornelius returned with a burlap sack full of supplies, bottles of medicine clinking against flour and coffee. He set it on the counter carefully, his eyes full of something that might have been shame. "Should have done something," the old man muttered. "Should have stopped him sooner. I'm sorry, girl. I'm so sorry." Josie couldn't respond. Her throat had closed up entirely. Nathaniel picked up the sack like it weighed nothing. "I've got a wagon outside. We'll take these to your mother. Make sure she's settled. Then—" He paused. "We talk. About options. About what comes next." "She ain't got options," Obadiah sneered from across the store. "She's got nothing. She is nothing. Just like her mother. Just like—" "One more word." Nathaniel didn't turn around, didn't raise his voice. "One more word. Whitmore, and I'll make sure every man in this territory knows you tried to sell your own daughter for a bottle of rye. You think your reputation's bad now? Try living as the man who couldn't even get a fair price for his own flesh and blood." Obadiah's mouth snapped shut. The silence stretched thick and heavy as the snow outside. Then Nathaniel walked toward the door, the supply sack over one shoulder, his free hand hovering near Josie's back without quite touching her, guiding her, protecting her, giving her space to move on her own terms. At the threshold, Josie stopped. She turned back to look at her father one last time. He stood in the middle of Thatcher's store, surrounded by townspeople who couldn't meet his eyes. A man who'd thrown away everything that ever mattered for the bottom of a bottle. "You're wrong," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, stronger than she felt. "I'm not worthless. I'm not nothing, and I'm going to prove it." She walked out into the cold. The wagon was waiting at the end of the street, a sturdy thing built for hard weather, with a patient gray horse stamping in the snow. Nathaniel helped Josie up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Which way to your mother?" "South. 3 miles past the creek bed. The old Jennings place." He clicked his tongue and the horse started moving. They rode in silence through the falling snow. Josie clutched the medicine bottles against her chest like they were made of gold, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. An hour ago, she'd been walking to town to buy supplies. Now she was riding away with a stranger, her father's curses still ringing in her ears, her whole life turned upside down. "You're shaking." She looked up to find Nathaniel watching her concern creasing his weathered face. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Despite everything, a laugh tried to escape her throat. It came out more like a sob. "I suppose I am." He reached behind the seat and pulled out a thick woolen blanket, draping it over her shoulders without asking permission. "Shock does that. Makes everything feel unreal, like you're watching yourself from far away." "You sound like you know." "I do." He didn't elaborate, just turned his eyes back to the road, guiding the wagon through the drifting snow with practiced ease. Josie studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the scar on his cheek, the way his hands held the reins like he'd been born to them. "You're a rancher," she said finally. 15 miles north." "That's right." "Cattle?" "Horses mostly, some cattle. Enough to keep busy." "And you just happened to be in town today?" "Needed supplies, salt for the horses, coffee for myself." He paused. "Sometimes God puts you where you need to be, even when you don't know why." Josie turned that over in her mind. God hadn't put her anywhere good in a long time. But maybe he'd put Nathaniel Calloway in Thatcher's store at exactly the right moment. Or maybe it was just luck. She wasn't sure she believed in either anymore. "You said something about options," she ventured. "About what comes next." "I did." "What did you mean?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels creaked through the snow. The horse's breath fogged in the cold air. "I've got a ranch that's falling apart," he said finally. 3 children who haven't smiled in 8 months. A house that hasn't felt like a home since my wife died. He glanced at her. "I'm not offering charity, Miss Whitmore. I'm offering work. Room, board, fair wages. Help me hold things together and I'll help you build something new." "Your wife died." "In February, childbed fever. Took the baby too." "I'm sorry." "So am I." They rode on. The old Jennings place appeared through the snow like a bad dream, a shack barely holding itself together, roof patched with whatever scraps could be found. Windows covered with oiled cloth instead of glass. Smoke trickled from the crooked chimney, the only sign of life. "This is where you live," Nathaniel said. Not a question. "Yes." He didn't comment, just set the brake and climbed down, coming around to help Josie from the wagon. His hands were gentle, respectful, nothing like her father's. "I'll come with you," he said. "In case." "Chewie." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Josie pushed open the door. The interior was dark and stifling, heated by a dying fire that barely kept the cold at bay. In the corner, on a straw mattress covered with threadbare quilts, a thin figure stirred. "Josie." The voice was weak, thready. "Baby, is that you?" "It's me, Ma." Josie rushed to her mother's side, kneeling on the dirt floor, reaching for the frail hand that emerged from the blankets. "I brought medicine, real medicine from Thatcher's store." Margaret Whitmore's eyes were fever-bright but clear. She'd been beautiful once Josie had her mother's red-brown hair, her green eyes, her stubborn chin. Now she looked like a ghost, worn down by sickness and sorrow, and a husband who'd stopped caring. "How did you—" Margaret's gaze moved past Josie to the doorway where Nathaniel stood with the supply sack. "Who—" "This is Mr. Calloway, Ma. He helped us. He paid for everything. Why? The question hung in the air. Nathaniel set the supplies on the rickety table and removed his hat, a gesture of respect that made Margaret's eyes widen slightly. Because your daughter deserved better than what she was getting, ma'am. And because I have children who need someone to care for them the way she obviously cares for you. Margaret studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze returned to Josie Sharp with understanding. What did your father do? Josie couldn't answer. The words stuck in her throat like stones. He tried to sell her, Nathaniel said quietly. In Thatcher's store, in front of half the town. Margaret closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her hollow cheek. Oh, baby. Oh, Josie. I'm so sorry. I should have gotten us out years ago. Should have fought harder. Should have... Mama, no. Josie squeezed her mother's hand. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. It is. I stayed. I kept hoping he'd change, kept believing the man I married was still in there somewhere. Margaret's voice broke. But he's gone. That man died the day your brother was born dead, and I was too weak to admit it. Mama. Go with him. Margaret's grip tightened with surprising strength. Go with Mr. Calloway. Get away from here. Get away from your father before he destroys you the way he destroyed himself. I can't leave you. You have to. No. Josie shook her head fiercely. I won't. I'll stay. I'll take care of you. Josie. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. I'm dying. We both know it. That medicine might buy me another week, maybe two, but it won't change what's coming. She reached up to touch Josie's face. The only thing I want now, the only thing I've ever wanted, is for you to have a life. A real life. Somewhere you're safe. Somewhere you're valued. I can't just... You can. You will. Margaret looked past her daughter to Nathaniel. Mr. Calloway, I don't know you. I don't know if you're a good man or just a man who did a good thing today. But I'm asking you. Her voice cracked. I'm begging you. Take care of my girl. Help her find her worth. She's got so much to give. So much strength. So much love. Don't let her father's poison convince her otherwise. Nathaniel moved closer, his hat still in his hands. Ma'am, I give you my word. Your daughter will have a safe place with me. Fair wages, honest work, her own room with a lock on the door. She can visit you whenever she wants. She can send money for medicine. And if... He paused. When you're ready, you'd be welcome at my ranch too. I've got space. Margaret smiled a real smile, tired but genuine. You're a kind man, Mr. Calloway. I can see it in your eyes. She turned back to Josie. Go, baby. Live for both of us. Josie felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart that had already been shattered. Something deeper. Some last thread of hope that things could go back to the way they were. That thread snapped, and she was finally free. I'll come back, she whispered, pressing her forehead to her mother's. Every week, I'll bring money, medicine, food. I won't abandon you. I know you won't. Margaret kissed her daughter's cheek. My brave girl. My strong, beautiful girl. Josie stayed there for a long moment, breathing in her mother's scent, lavender and wood smoke, and something sour, underneath the smell of sickness that wouldn't let go. Then she forced herself to stand. The medicine, she said, her voice barely working. I should give her the medicine before we go. She measured out the fever tonic with shaking hands, helped her mother drink it, tucked the blankets tighter around her frail frame. Nathaniel waited by the door, silent and patient, giving them whatever time they needed. Finally, there was nothing left to do. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now go. Build something beautiful. Josie walked out of the shack that had been her prison for 3 years. She climbed into Nathaniel Calloway's wagon without looking back. And as they rode away through the falling snow, she let herself cry for the first time. Not from shame. Not from fear. From something that felt almost like hope. The wagon ride to Nathaniel's ranch took 3 hours through snow that wouldn't stop falling. Josie didn't speak. Neither did he. But somewhere between her mother's shack and the open range, she stopped crying and started thinking. About what she'd left behind. About what she was riding toward. About the man beside her who'd paid for her freedom without asking anything in return. "You said 3 children." She finally managed, her voice raw from tears. "That's right." "How old?" Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road. "Samuel's 13. Benjamin's 9. Ruth just turned 6 last month. And their mother, your wife, she died in February. Childbed fever. Took her and the baby both." "What was her name?" He was quiet for so long Josie thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Miriam. Her name was Miriam. The way he said it, like it still hurt to shape the word, told Josie everything she needed to know about how much he'd loved her. "The children?" she said carefully. "How are they handling it?" "They're not." Josie waited. "Samuel's angry at the world. Blames God, blames me, blames anyone he can reach. Benjamin's gone quiet, used to chatter all day long, now I'm lucky if I get 10 words out of him before supper. And Ruth." His jaw tightened. "Ruth hasn't spoken since the funeral. Not one word in 8 months. Not one word. Doc says there's nothing wrong with her throat. Says it's grief locked up inside her so tight she can't let it out." He glanced at Josie. "I'm telling you this so you know what you're walking into. These aren't easy children right now. They're hurting, and hurt people hurt others." "I understand. Do you?" "Mr. Calloway, I've been hurting my whole life. I know what it looks like from the inside." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Reckon you do at that." They crested a hill, and Josie saw the ranch spread out below them. Even through the falling snow, she could make out the house, 2 stories solid wood, a wide porch wrapped around the front. A barn stood nearby, big enough to shelter dozens of horses. Fences ran in neat lines across the property, disappearing into the white distance. It looked like a real home. The kind she'd dreamed about as a little girl, before dreams became luxuries she couldn't afford. "It's not much," Nathaniel said, misreading her silence. "Needs work. Miriam always wanted me to paint it, but I never got around to it, and now it's beautiful." He looked at her sharply, like he was checking to see if she was mocking him. Whatever he saw in her face made his shoulders relax slightly. "Let's hope the children agree with you." They didn't. The moment the wagon rolled into the yard, 3 figures emerged from the barn. Josie's first impression was of smallness. Even Samuel, tall for 13, seemed diminished somehow, hunched in on himself, like he was trying to take up less space. Benjamin hung back in his brother's shadow, watching with wary eyes. And Ruth. Ruth wasn't looking at Josie at all. She was staring at the ground, her small hands fisted in her coat, her blonde braids hanging limp and tangled. "Children." Nathaniel climbed down from the wagon and extended his hand to help Josie. "This is Miss Whitmore. She's going to be staying with us for a while, helping around the house." Silence. Samuel's eyes raked over Josie, taking in her threadbare dress, her worn boots, the red marks on her wrist where her father had grabbed her. His lip curled. "We don't need help." "Samuel. We've been managing fine on our own. We don't need some stranger coming in here trying to—" "That's enough!" Nathaniel's voice cracked like a whip. Samuel flinched, and for just a moment, Josie saw the scared boy underneath all that anger. Then the mask slammed back into place harder than before. "Whatever," Samuel muttered. "Do what you want. You always do." He turned and stalked toward the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Benjamin watched his brother go, then looked at Josie with something that might have been apology. "He's not usually this bad," he said quietly. "He's just hurting," Josie finished. "I know." Benjamin blinked, surprised. Then he nodded once and followed his brother inside, leaving only Ruth standing in the snow. The little girl still hadn't looked up, hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. Josie crouched down slowly, bringing herself to Ruth's level. "Hello, Ruth. My name's Josie. I'm going to be helping your papa take care of things around here." "Nothing. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. I just wanted to say hello." Still nothing. Josie straightened up and looked at Nathaniel, who was watching his daughter with an expression of helpless grief that made Josie's chest ache. "Give her time," Josie said softly. "Grief doesn't follow a schedule." 8 months. I know. The doc says. The doc isn't a 6-year-old girl who lost her mother. Josie kept her voice gentle. "Ruth will talk when she's ready. Pushing her won't help." Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up Ruth without a word, carried her toward the house, and left Josie standing alone in the falling snow. The inside of the house was exactly what Nathaniel had warned her about. Dishes piled in the sink, some of them growing things Josie didn't want to identify. Clothes scattered across every surface. Dust thick enough to write your name in. The curtains hung crooked and the floor was tracked with mud and straw. But underneath the mess, Josie could see what this place had been, what it could be again. "I know it's bad," Nathaniel said from the doorway. "I've been trying to keep the ranch running and take care of the children, and something had to give. Usually it's the housework." "It's fine." Josie rolled up her sleeves. "It just needs attention. You don't have to start tonight. You've been through—" "I need to do something." She cut him off. "I need to keep my hands busy, or I'm going to start thinking about—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Please, let me work." He understood. She saw it in his eyes, that recognition of someone running from their own thoughts, trying to outpace grief through sheer physical motion. "Kitchen's through there. Bedroom's upstairs. Your room is the one at the end of the hall. It was the guest room, but it's yours now. Lock on the door." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met Samuel when he's really angry." Josie started with the dishes, heating water on the stove and scrubbing each plate until it shone. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when she felt eyes on her back. Benjamin stood in the doorway watching her work with that same wary expression from earlier. "You can come in," Josie said without turning around. "I don't bite." He edged into the kitchen, keeping close to the wall. "Are you really going to stay?" "That's the plan." "Samuel says you won't. He says Papa's just being stupid, and you'll leave as soon as you get what you want." Josie set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. Benjamin had his father's dark hair, but his mother's eyes big and brown, and far too old for 9 years. "What do you think?" she asked. "I don't know." He scuffed his foot against the floor. "People always leave. Mama left. Then the baby. Then Mrs. Henderson from church, she was bringing us food, but she stopped coming after a while. Everyone always leaves. I'm not everyone. Not." "That's what they all say." Josie dried her hands and crouched down to his level the way she had with Ruth. "Benjamin, I'm not going to make you promises I can't keep. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, or next week, or next month. But I can promise you this." She held his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere tonight, or tomorrow, or the day after that. And every day I'm here, I'm going to do my best to take care of you, and your brother, and your sister. Is that enough for now?" Benjamin considered this with the seriousness of a much older child. Then he nodded slowly. "I guess so." "Good. Now," she stood up. "Can you show me where your father keeps the broom?" Benjamin showed her the broom, and the dustpan, and the bucket for mopping. And slowly, hesitantly, he started helping, sweeping up crumbs, while Josie scrubbed the floor, stacking dishes, while she washed, answering her quiet questions about where things went and how his mother used to organize the pantry. By the time supper rolled around, the kitchen was clean for the first time in months. Samuel refused to come down. "He's being stubborn," Benjamin reported, sliding into his seat at the table. "I told him you made stew, but he said he'd rather starve." He won't starve. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, Ruth perched silently beside him. He'll come down when he's hungry enough. Josie set out bowls of the stew she'd cobbled together from the supplies Nathaniel had bought: beef and potatoes and carrots. Nothing fancy but hot and filling. She'd made biscuits too from a recipe her mother had taught her years ago. Smells good, Benjamin said, and for the first time, something like warmth crept into his voice. Ruth picked up her spoon but didn't eat. She just stared at the stew, her small face blank and distant. You need to eat something, sweetheart, Nathaniel said gently. Ruth didn't respond. Ruth, please. Still nothing. Josie watched this exchange, her heart breaking for both of them. The father who didn't know how to reach his daughter. The daughter who'd retreated so far inside herself she might never come out. Ruth, Josie said quietly, you don't have to eat it all. But do you think you could try 3 bites? Just 3, that's all I'm asking. The little girl looked up for the first time since Josie had arrived. Her eyes were the same gray as her father's, but where Nathaniel's held sorrow, Ruth's held nothing at all. Just emptiness, where a 6-year-old's joy should have been. 3 bites, Josie repeated. And then you can be done if you want. For a long moment nothing happened. Then slowly Ruth lifted her spoon, dipped it into the stew, raised it to her mouth. 1 bite, 2 bites, 3 bites. Then she set the spoon down and went back to staring at nothing. But she'd eaten. For the first time in God knew how long, according to the stunned look on Nathaniel's face, she'd actually eaten. How did you? He started. Small goals, Josie said quietly. Big expectations are too heavy when you're carrying grief. Small ones are easier to meet. Nathaniel looked at her like she'd just performed a miracle. Upstairs, a door slammed. I'll take him a bowl, Josie said, rising from her seat. He won't. Let me try. She climbed the stairs with the bowl of stew and a biscuit balanced on top. Samuel's door was at the end of the hall, firmly shut. She knocked once. Go away. I brought you supper. I said go away. Josie set the bowl on the floor beside the door. I'm leaving it here. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to look at me. But you do have to eat because your father needs you strong and your brother and sister need you present. So eat the stew, Samuel, and when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Silence from behind the door. Josie went back downstairs. 20 minutes later, she heard footsteps in the hallway. The soft clink of a bowl being picked up. A door opening and closing. When she checked later, the bowl was empty. That night, Josie lay in her new room, her own room with a lock on the door, and clean sheets on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Everything ached. Her body from the cold walk and the wagon ride, and the hours of cleaning. Her heart from leaving her mother. Her mind from trying to process the impossible fact that her life had completely changed in the span of a single day. This morning she'd been Josie Whitmore, worthless daughter of a drunk. Tonight she was, what, a housekeeper, a caretaker. Something in between. She didn't know, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to find out. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Josie woke before dawn, started the fire, made breakfast. Nathaniel left early to work the horses, returning muddy and exhausted each evening. Benjamin began appearing in the kitchen each morning to help small tasks, at first setting the table or fetching water, but growing bolder as he realized Josie wouldn't snap at him for mistakes. Ruth remained silent, but she ate. 3 bites at breakfast, 5 at lunch, nearly half her plate at supper. Progress measured in spoonfuls. And Samuel. Samuel was a storm that wouldn't break. He came to meals when called, but he didn't speak, didn't look at Josie, didn't acknowledge her existence beyond the bare minimum required by his father's rules. He did his chores with angry efficiency, then disappeared to the barn or his room, shutting everyone out. Give him time, Nathaniel said one evening, watching his eldest son stalk away from the table. He's always been the stubborn one. He's the oldest. He probably feels like he has to be strong for the others. He's 13. He shouldn't have to be strong for anyone. Shouldn't and are different things. On the fourth day, the storm hit. Josie had seen Wyoming blizzards before, but nothing like this. The wind came howling out of nowhere, turning the world into a white wall of screaming fury. The temperature plummeted. The snow piled up so fast you could watch it rise. Nathaniel was in the barn when it started tending to a mare about to foal. He didn't come back for dinner. He didn't come back as darkness fell. And when full night arrived with no sign of him, Josie started to worry. "Papa's fine," Benjamin said, but his voice shook. "He knows what he's doing." "I'm sure he does." Josie kept her own voice steady. "But I'm going to check on him anyway. You three stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but me or your father." "I'm coming with you," Samuel said. Josie turned to find him standing in the kitchen doorway, his jaw set with that familiar stubbornness, but this time directed at her, not against her. "Samuel. He's my father. I'm coming." Something shifted in Josie's chest. This angry boy who'd barely looked at her in 4 days was willing to walk into a blizzard for his father. "All right," she said, "but you stay close. And if I tell you to go back, you go back. Understood?" "Understood." The cold hit them like a wall. Josie couldn't see 3 feet in front of her face. She grabbed Samuel's arm. He flinched but didn't pull away, and together they fought their way toward the barn, the wind tearing at their clothes and stealing their breath. The barn door was frozen shut. "Help me!" Josie shouted over the wind. Samuel threw his weight against the door beside her. Once. Twice. On the third try, it burst open and they tumbled inside. Nathaniel was on the ground. The mare was standing over him, wild-eyed and frightened, her sides heaving with contractions. And Nathaniel wasn't moving. "Papa!" Samuel ran to his father, dropping to his knees in the hay. "Papa, wake up! Please, Papa, please!" Josie was already checking for injuries. A gash on Nathaniel's forehead bleeding sluggishly. A bruise forming along his temple. He must have been kicked, the mare was panicking, and he'd gotten too close. "He's breathing," she said quickly. "Samuel, he's breathing. He's just unconscious. We have to get him to the house. We can't move him in this storm. We'd all freeze." Josie's mind raced. "We need to keep him warm and wait it out here." "But the mare—" The mare screamed a sound of pain and fear that made both of them jump. Her legs buckled, and she went down hard, thrashing in the hay. "She's foaling," Samuel breathed. "She's foaling and Papa's hurt and— Samuel!" Josie grabbed his shoulders and made him look at her. "I need you to stay with your father. Keep him warm. Keep pressure on that wound. Can you do that? What are you going to do? Help the mare? Do you know how—" "No," Josie admitted. "But I'm going to try anyway." The next hour was the longest of Josie's life. She'd never delivered a foal before. She'd watched her father shoe horses years ago before the drinking got bad, but that was different. This was blood and screaming and a panicked animal that could kill her with one misplaced kick. But she talked to the mare the way she'd talked to Ruth, quiet and steady, making no sudden movements, asking nothing except that she keep breathing. "Easy, girl. Easy. I know it hurts. I know you're scared. But you're going to get through this. You're going to be fine." The foal came wrong, legs tangled, stuck halfway. Josie had to reach in and turn. It had to feel the mare's muscles clamping down on her arm, had to ignore the pain and the fear and the certainty that she was doing everything wrong. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, baby. You can do this." One final push. The foal slid out in a rush of blood and fluid, landing in the hay with a wet thump. For one terrible moment, it didn't move. Then it sneezed, shook its head, and tried to stand on legs that were all knees and no coordination. The mare lifted her head and made a soft sound, not a scream this time, but something gentler, something like wonder. "You did it," Josie breathed. "You did it, girl. You're a mother." Behind her, Samuel was crying. Josie turned to find him still kneeling beside Nathaniel, tears streaming down his face, his hands red with blood from keeping pressure on his father's wound. "He won't wake up," Samuel choked out. "I keep calling him and he won't wake up, and I can't. I can't lose him too. I can't." Josie was beside him in an instant. She pressed her fingers to Nathaniel's throat, felt his pulse beating strong and steady beneath her touch. "He's going to be fine," she said firmly. "Head wounds bleed a lot, but they look worse than they are. He's going to have a headache like nothing else when he wakes up, but he's going to wake up, I promise." "How do you know?" "Because he's too stubborn to leave you." She managed a small smile. "I've only known him 4 days, and I can already tell that much." Samuel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is stubborn. Mama always said—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Mama always said he was the most stubborn man in Wyoming." She sounds like she knew him well. She did. They used to argue about everything, what to have for supper, whether to paint the house, how to train the horses. Samuel wiped his face with his sleeve. But they never really fought. Not angry fighting. It was more like a game they played. Like they just liked disagreeing with each other. "That's love," Josie said softly. "Finding someone whose stubbornness matches yours." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, so quietly, she almost didn't hear it. "I'm sorry I was mean to you." "You weren't mean. You were scared." "Same thing sometimes." "Maybe. But being scared doesn't make you bad, Samuel. It just makes you human." He looked at her with those wounded eyes, so much pain for someone so young. "Do you think she's watching Mama? Do you think she knows we're okay?" "I think if anyone could find a way to watch over their children from heaven, it would be a mother." Josie brushed the hair back from Nathaniel's forehead. "And I think she'd be proud of you, standing out in a blizzard to help your father. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." Nathaniel groaned. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. He tried to sit up, then fell back with a hiss of pain. "Don't move," Josie said quickly. "You got kicked. There's a gash on your head." "The mare?" "She's fine, the foal too. Samuel helped me deliver it." Nathaniel's gaze shifted to his son. "Sam?" "I'm here, Papa." Samuel's voice cracked. "I'm right here." "Good boy." Nathaniel reached up with a shaking hand and gripped his son's arm. "Good boy." They waited out the storm in the barn, huddled together for warmth, while the wind howled outside and the mare nursed her newborn foal. Josie kept checking Nathaniel's wound, kept making sure he stayed awake, kept the conversation going, even when her own voice started to rasp. By the time the storm finally died and the first gray light of dawn crept through the barn slats, Nathaniel was sitting up on his own, and Samuel had fallen asleep against his father's shoulder. "Thank you," Nathaniel said quietly. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my horse. Maybe saved my life." He looked at her with those gray eyes clearer now, despite the pain. "And you reached my son. Do you know he hasn't cried since the funeral 8 months, and he wouldn't let himself break. Tonight he cried. He loves you. He was scared of losing you. He was scared of losing himself." Nathaniel's voice was rough with emotion. Miriam's death broke something in him. He's been trying so hard to hold the pieces together, to be the man of the house, to take care of his siblings. He forgot that he's still allowed to be a child. He remembered tonight. Because of you. Josie didn't know what to say to that, so she just sat there in the cold barn with the smell of hay and horses and new life, and let the silence speak for itself. Later they made their way back to the house. Benjamin and Ruth were waiting at the window, their faces pressed against the glass. When the door opened, Benjamin launched himself at his father, crying and laughing at the same time. And Ruth. Ruth walked straight to Josie. She reached up with one small hand and tugged at Josie's sleeve. Josie crouched down, bringing herself to the little girl's level. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ruth's lips moved. No sound came out. She tried again. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 words. The first words she'd spoken in 8 months. Josie's eyes filled with tears. "You're welcome, Ruth." The little girl nodded once, then went to her father and climbed into his arms, burying her face against his chest. Over Ruth's head, Nathaniel met Josie's gaze. His eyes were wet. "Seems like you belong here," he said quietly. Josie looked at this family, this broken, beautiful family that had taken her in when she had nothing. At Samuel, who'd cried in a barn and found himself again. At Benjamin, who'd helped her clean and organize and rebuild. At Ruth, who'd finally found her voice. "Maybe I do," she said, and for the first time since she could remember, she actually believed it. 2 weeks passed and Josie learned what it meant to belong somewhere. She learned the rhythm of the Callaway Ranch, the early mornings, and the late nights, the endless cycle of feeding and cleaning and mending. She learned which floorboards creaked and which ones were silent. She learned that Samuel liked his coffee bitter, that Benjamin drew pictures when he thought no one was watching, that Ruth would only eat her vegetables if they were mixed in with her meat. She learned that Nathaniel watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she learned slowly that the ache in her chest wasn't just grief anymore. It was something else, something that scared her more than her father ever had. "Miss Josie." She looked up from the bread she was kneading to find Ruth standing in the kitchen doorway. The little girl had started talking more in the past 2 weeks. Not much, just a few words here and there, but each one felt like a gift. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Can you braid my hair like Mama used to?" Josie's hands stilled in the dough. She looked at Ruth, at this small, wounded child who had chosen to trust her, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Of course I can. Come here." Ruth crossed the kitchen and climbed onto the chair beside her. Josie wiped her hands on her apron and began working through the tangles in Ruth's blonde hair, gentle as she could manage. "Your mama braided your hair every morning." Ruth nodded. "She said braids kept the wild things out." The wild things. The bad dreams. The scary thoughts. "She said if you braid your hair tight, they can't get in." Josie's throat tightened. "That's a beautiful idea." "Do you have wild things, Miss Josie?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She thought about her father's hands on her arms, shoving her to her knees. She thought about her mother dying in that shack alone, except for memories. She thought about the look in Nathaniel's eyes when he watched her across the dinner table. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Everybody has wild things, Ruth. The trick is not letting them win." "How do you not let them win?" "You find people who help you fight them. People who make the wild things smaller just by being there." Ruth considered this with the gravity only a 6-year-old could muster. Then she said, "You make my wild things smaller." Josie's hands trembled as she finished the braid. "You make mine smaller too, sweetheart." The kitchen door banged open. Samuel stood there, chest heaving, face white as the snow outside. "Miss Josie, you need to come, now." "What's wrong?" "Someone's here, from town. They're asking for you." Josie's blood ran cold. She followed Samuel out to the front porch. Ruth's small hand clutched in hers. A man on horseback waited in the yard. Deputy Carson from Bitter Creek, his badge glinting in the winter sun. "Miss Whitmore." "That's me." "Got a message for you." Carson shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. "Your mother took a bad turn 2 days ago. Doc did what he could, but—" He paused, and Josie knew what was coming before he said it. "I'm sorry, miss. She passed this morning." The world tilted. Josie heard Ruth say something, felt Samuel's hand on her arm, saw Deputy Carson's mouth moving, but none of it registered. All she could think was, I wasn't there. I wasn't there when she needed me. I left her alone, and now she's gone. Miss Whitmore, are you all right? She needs to sit down. Nathaniel's voice coming from somewhere behind her. his hands on her shoulders, guiding her to the porch steps. "Sam, get her some water. Ruth, go find Benjamin." "But Papa—" Now Ruth. The children scattered. Josie sat on the cold wooden steps and stared at nothing, her mind a white blank of grief. "Josie." Nathaniel crouched in front of her, his gray eyes searching her face. "Josie, look at me." She looked at him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. There was nothing you could have done. I should have been there anyway." She felt the tears coming hot and relentless, spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. Nathaniel didn't say anything. He just pulled her forward until her forehead rested against his shoulder and let her cry. Deputy Carson cleared his throat. "There's more, I'm afraid." Josie lifted her head. "What else?" "Your father's been causing trouble in town, drunk mostly, but last night he got into a fight at the saloon. Beat a man pretty bad." Carson shifted his weight. "He's been telling everyone who'll listen that you abandoned your mother, that you're nothing but a—" He stopped, glancing at Nathaniel. "Well, you can imagine." "What exactly is he saying?" Nathaniel's voice was dangerously quiet. "Things a decent man wouldn't repeat. Things about Miss Whitmore and you and what kind of arrangement you've got here." "That's a lie." "I know it is. Most folks do. But your father's got a loud mouth, miss, and some people in town are starting to listen." Josie stood up. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold her. "Where's my mother now?" "Doc Henderson's got her. He's been asking about funeral arrangements." "I'll make them. Today." "Josie," Nathaniel started. "I have to." She turned to face him. "I have to bury my mother. I have to do this right. It's the last thing I can do for her." "Then I'm coming with you." "You don't have to." "I'm coming." His jaw was set, that stubborn look she was starting to know so well. "You're not facing this alone." The ride into Bitter Creek took 3 hours. Nathaniel drove the wagon, while Josie sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket that couldn't touch the cold inside her. The children had wanted to come, even Samuel, who'd stood in the yard with his fists clenched, looking like he wanted to fight someone on her behalf. But Nathaniel had been firm. "You stay here. Watch the animals. We'll be back before dark." "But Papa—" "Sam, I need you to be the man of the house while I'm gone. Can you do that?" Something had shifted in Samuel's face. Pride, maybe. Or just the weight of responsibility. "Yes, sir." Now, as the town came into view through the bare winter trees, Josie felt her stomach clench with dread. She hadn't been back since the day Nathaniel had taken her away. Hadn't seen her father since he'd shoved her to her knees and tried to sell her for whiskey. "Whatever happens," Nathaniel said quietly, "I'm right beside you." "What if he's there at the funeral?" "Then we deal with him together." Doc Henderson's office was a small building near the church. He met them at the door with kind eyes and a weary face. "Miss Whitmore, I'm so sorry about your mother. She was a good woman." "Thank you. Can I—" Josie's voice caught. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She's in the back. I've got her cleaned up and ready for viewing." Josie walked into the back room alone. She'd asked Nathaniel to wait, needed this moment to be just her and her mother one last time. Margaret Whitmore lay on a narrow table, her hands folded across her chest, her face peaceful, in a way it hadn't been in years. Someone, Doc Henderson, probably had brushed her hair and dressed her in a clean white gown. She looked like she was sleeping. "Oh, Mama." Josie sank into the chair beside the table and took her mother's cold hand. The tears came again, but quieter this time, grief washing through her in waves instead of floods. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry for everything." Silence. "I found a good place, Mama. Good people. There's a man, Nathaniel, he's kind and strong, and he doesn't hurt anyone. And there are children who need me. A little girl who just started talking again, and a boy who draws pictures of birds, and another boy who's so angry, but he's learning to let it go." She squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm building something, Mama. Just like you wanted. I'm building a life." She sat there for a long time talking to her mother about everything and nothing. About the ranch and the children, about the storm and the foal and Ruth's first words. About the way Nathaniel looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious. "I think I might love him, Mama," she whispered. "I know it's too soon. I know I barely know him. But when I'm with him, I feel—" She searched for the word safe. "I feel safe." A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Whitmore." Doc Henderson's voice. "Someone's here to see you." Josie's heart dropped. "Who?" The door opened, and her father stepped through. Obadiah Whitmore looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His clothes were filthy, his face unshaven, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He reeked of whiskey even from across the room. "There you are," he slurred. "Come crawling back now that she's dead, huh?" Guilty conscience finally caught up. "Get out." "This is my wife. I got a right to be here." "You lost that right when you stopped caring about her." Obadiah lurched forward, and Josie jumped to her feet, putting the table between them. "You ungrateful little," he snarled. "I raised you, fed you, kept you alive for 19 years, and this is how you repay me. Running off with some stranger, leaving your mother to die alone." "I left because you tried to sell me." "I was doing you a favor. You think you're worth more than what I asked. You think you're special." He laughed ugly and mean. "You're nothing, girl. Always have been. Just like your mother. Just like—" "That's enough." Nathaniel stood in the doorway. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move toward Obadiah. But something in his stance, the set of his shoulders, the coldness in his eyes, made Josie's father take a step back. "This ain't your business, Calloway." "You're wrong." Nathaniel stepped into the room, putting himself between Obadiah and Josie. "You made it my business the day you tried to sell her, and you made it worse every day since spreading lies about her through town." "Lies, I'm just telling the truth. Everyone knows what kind of woman goes to live with a widower. Everyone knows what she's really—" Nathaniel moved. Josie didn't see the punch, it was too fast. One moment Obadiah was talking. The next, he was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose. "Get up," Nathaniel said quietly. "You broke my nose, you crazy son of a—" "Get up and walk out of here. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. And if I ever hear you say another word about your daughter, I'll make sure you regret it." Obadiah scrambled to his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding face. His eyes darted between Nathaniel and Josie, calculating, afraid. "This ain't over," he spat. "You think you can just take her from me? She's mine. She'll always be mine." "No." Josie stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I was never yours. I was Mama's. I was my own. And now I'm—" She glanced at Nathaniel, then back at her father. "Now I'm building something you can never touch. You'll come crawling back. When he gets tired of you, when he throws you out like the trash you are, you'll come crawling." "Leave!" Nathaniel's voice was ice. "Now!" Obadiah left. The silence after the door slammed was deafening. Josie stood frozen, her whole body shaking, the adrenaline leaving her system all at once. "Josie!" Nathaniel was beside her, his hands on her shoulders. "Are you all right? You hit him." He had it coming. "You hit him for me." Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. "I'd do a lot more than that for you." Josie stared at him, this man who'd saved her twice now, who'd defended her honor without being asked, who looked at her like she was worth fighting for. "Why?" she whispered. "Because someone should have done it years ago." His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't known she'd shed. "Because you deserve to be protected. Because—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Because I care about you, Josie. More than I probably should." "Nathaniel, I know it's not the time. I know you just lost your mother and you're grieving, and the last thing you need is—" He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything." "No." Josie caught his arm. Don't apologize, please." They stood there in Doc Henderson's back room, with her mother's body between them and her father's blood on the floor, and something passed between them that words couldn't capture. "After the funeral," Josie said quietly. "After this is done, we should talk." Nathaniel nodded. After the funeral. The burial was held the next morning. Josie had expected a small gathering. Her mother hadn't had many friends in recent years, hadn't had the energy or the spirit to maintain connections. But when she arrived at the cemetery, she found a crowd. Nearly 24 people had come. Mrs. Patterson from the general store, Deputy Carson, old Cornelius Thatcher, who'd refused her father's trade that terrible day, the pastor's wife, women from the church quilting circle, men who'd known her father before the drinking got bad. "Your mother touched more lives than you knew," the pastor said as he began the service. "She was a woman of quiet faith and tremendous courage who raised a daughter of strength and character under circumstances that would have broken a lesser person." Josie listened to the words wash over her. She felt Nathaniel's presence beside her solid and warm. She felt the eyes of the townspeople on her, curious, sympathetic, some of them ashamed. After the service, people approached her one by one. "I'm sorry I didn't do more," Mrs. Patterson said, dabbing at her eyes. "I saw what your father was doing, and I didn't speak up. That was wrong of me." "We should have helped." Cornelius Thatcher added, his weathered face heavy with regret. "All those years we watched your family fall apart, and we did nothing. That's on us." "She was a good woman," someone else said. "Better than she ever got credit for." Josie accepted their condolences with grace she didn't feel. Part of her wanted to scream at them. "Where were you when we needed you? Where were you when my father was drinking himself to death, and my mother was wasting away, and I was alone, so alone?" But another part of her understood. Fear kept people frozen. She knew that better than anyone. Miss Whitmore. A woman she didn't recognize stepped forward, middle-aged, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. "I'm Delilah Prescott. My husband owns the bank." Josie stiffened. She'd heard the name. Delilah Prescott was known as the queen of Bitter Creek's social scene, and not in a kind way. "Mrs. Prescott, I wanted to offer my condolences." The words were proper, but something in Delilah's tone made Josie wary. "And to say that I hope you know what you're doing, living out at the Callaway Ranch with no chaperone. I'm the housekeeper. Is that what they're calling it these days?" Nathaniel stepped forward, but Josie held up her hand. "Mrs. Prescott, I've just buried my mother. This isn't the time or place for whatever you're trying to say. I'm just concerned for your reputation, dear, and for Mr. Callaway's children. They've been through so much already. It would be a shame if they were exposed to—" "That's enough." The voice came from behind them. Josie turned to find Mrs. Patterson standing there, her chin raised and her eyes blazing. "Delilah Prescott, you should be ashamed of yourself. This girl just lost her mother. Her father tried to sell her like livestock, and you're standing here spreading poison at a funeral." Mrs. Patterson shook her head in disgust. "I've known you 30 years, Delilah, and I've never said a word against you. But this is too much. This girl has done nothing but work hard and take care of those children, and if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one with the problem." A murmur ran through the crowd. Other women nodded. Even some of the men shifted uncomfortably, looking at Delilah with new eyes. Delilah's face went red. "I was only trying to—" "You were trying to tear down someone who's already been torn down enough." Cornelius Thatcher stepped forward, his voice carrying across the cemetery. "I watched Obadiah Whitmore try to trade his own daughter for whiskey. I watched this young woman get back up off her knees and walk out of my store with more dignity than most men I know. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand here and let you make her feel small." "Same goes for me," someone else said. "And me." "Me too." One by one, people stepped forward. Not everyone. Josie could see some faces that remained skeptical, some who avoided her eyes. But enough. Enough to make Delilah Prescott's sneer falter. Enough to make Josie's heart swell with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I think, Nathaniel said quietly, that you've said enough, Mrs. Prescott. Delilah drew herself up, trying to salvage her dignity. We'll see how long this lasts, she said coldly. When the truth comes out, the truth is already out. Josie stepped forward, looking Delilah Prescott straight in the eyes. The truth is that my father hurt me, and my mother abandoned me to his cruelty. The truth is that Mr. Calloway gave me a choice when no one else would. The truth is that I work hard, I care for his children, and I have done nothing to be ashamed of. She paused. Can you say the same? Delilah's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The crowd began to disperse after that. People patted Josie's shoulder, shook Nathaniel's hand, murmured final condolences. By the time the cemetery was empty, the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon. That was something, Nathaniel said. I didn't mean to cause a scene. You didn't cause anything. Delilah Prescott did. He turned to face her. But you handled it, stood your ground, made them see you for who you really are. Who am I? Someone worth fighting for. His voice dropped low. Someone I'd fight for any day of the week. Josie looked up at him. This man who'd punched her father, who'd stood beside her through the hardest day of her life, who'd somehow become the center of gravity she'd been searching for her whole life. Nathaniel. Not here. He glanced around at the empty cemetery. Not yet. When we're home, when the children are in bed, then we talk. Home. The word echoed through her like a bell. Yes, she said. When we're home. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but different from before. Something had shifted between them, some wall had come down, some door had opened. Josie could feel it in the way Nathaniel held the reins, the way his shoulder brushed hers around every curve. Could feel it in her own racing heart. When they pulled into the yard, all three children came running. Miss Josie. Ruth reached her first, wrapping small arms around Josie's waist. We were worried. Samuel said maybe you weren't coming back. I told her that's not what I said, Samuel muttered, but there was relief in his eyes too. I'm here, sweetheart. Josie hugged Ruth tight. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Promise. That night after supper was eaten and dishes were washed and children were tucked into bed, Josie found Nathaniel on the front porch. He was staring out at the snow-covered fields, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Can I join you? He shifted over, making room. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. The cold bit at Josie's cheeks, but she didn't mind. She felt more alive than she had in years. Miriam loved nights like this, Nathaniel said finally. Used to say the stars were God's promises, written where we could see them. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Wiser than me most days. He set down his coffee cup. When she died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd never feel anything again except grief. Thought I'd just exist day after day until eventually I didn't anymore. And now... He turned to look at her, and Josie's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. Now I'm starting to think there might be more. That maybe God didn't just take something away, maybe he was making room for something new. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her cold skin. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving, and I'm still grieving, and neither of us is ready for... I'm ready. The words came out before she could stop them. But she didn't want to stop them, didn't want to pretend anymore. Josie, I don't know what this is, I don't know where it goes, but I know that when I'm with you I feel safe, I feel seen. I feel like maybe... She squeezed his hand. Maybe I'm worth more than a sack of flour after all. Nathaniel made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You're worth more than anything I could name, more than this ranch, more than every horse in my barn, more than... He stopped, shaking his head. I'm not good with words. Never have been. But I want you to know whatever this is, whatever it becomes, I'm in it. All the way. For as long as you'll have me. Even with my father out there spreading lies, let him spread lies. We'll live the truth. Even with Delilah Prescott watching every move we make. Let her watch. We've got nothing to hide. Even with 3 children who've already lost one mother. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then, the children love you. Ruth talks now because of you. Benjamin smiles now because of you. Even Samuel. He laughed softly. He asked me this morning if you were going to stay forever. When I said I hoped so, he said good. That's as close to approval as Sam gets. Josie felt tears prick her eyes. They're amazing, Nathaniel. All 3 of them. I don't want to replace their mother. You're not replacing anyone. You're adding to our family. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. If you'll have us. If I'll... Josie stared at him. Are you asking me? Not yet. It's too soon for that. We need time. The children need time. But I want you to know where this is heading, at least in my mind. He held her gaze. I want to court you properly, Josie Whitmore. With intention. With respect. With the goal of making you my wife if you'll have me. The word hung between them bright and terrifying and wonderful. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Nathaniel Calloway. Court me properly. And when you're ready to ask the real question, she smiled through her tears, I'll be ready to give you the real answer. He pulled her close, then wrapping his arms around her as the stars wheeled overhead. And for the first time since she could remember, Josie felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home. She was finally home. The weeks that followed were the happiest Josie had ever known. Winter held its grip on Wyoming, but inside the Calloway Ranch warmth bloomed in unexpected places. In Ruth's laughter when Josie chased her through the kitchen. In Benjamin's drawings now featuring 5 figures instead of 4. In Samuel's grudging smiles that came more often each day. And in the way Nathaniel looked at her across the dinner table, like she was something precious he'd almost given up hoping to find. He courted her properly, just as he'd promised. Small gestures at first, a wildflower pressed between the pages of a book he knew she was reading. A cup of coffee waiting for her each morning before she even came downstairs. His hand finding hers in the darkness after the children were asleep. Papa's being strange. Samuel observed one evening watching his father help Josie with her coat before their weekly trip to town. Strange how? Benjamin asked. Nice strange. Mama and Papa strange. Ruth looked up from her drawing. I like it. Yeah, Samuel said slowly. Me too. The town had changed too, or maybe Josie had. People nodded to her in the street now. Women stopped to chat about recipes and weather and the price of flour. Even Cornelius Thatcher had taken to setting aside the best cuts of fabric whenever he knew she was coming. For the children, he always said. But Josie noticed he never charged full price. The only shadow that remained was Delilah Prescott, who watched Josie from across the church pews with narrowed eyes and whispered to her circle of friends whenever Josie passed. But even that felt smaller now, a nuisance rather than a threat. She'll come around, Mrs. Patterson said one Sunday after services. Or she won't. Either way, you've got people in your corner now. Josie did. For the first time in her life, she did. The Bitter Creek Winter Social was announced in early February, a dance and celebration to mark the halfway point of the cold season. Josie hadn't planned to attend. Dances were for couples, for families, for people who belonged. You're going, Nathaniel said when she mentioned it. I don't have anything to wear. Then we'll get you something. Nathaniel, I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm asking. He took her hands in his gray eyes serious. I want to take you to that dance, Josie Whitmore. I want everyone in Bitter Creek to see us together. I want them to know that you're... He paused, searching for words. That I'm what... Mine. The word came out rough, almost surprised, like he hadn't meant to say it. If you want to be. Only if you want to be. Josie's heart hammered against her ribs. I want to be. His smile could have melted all the snow in Wyoming. Mrs. Patterson helped her make the dress a simple thing, blue calico that matched her eyes with white lace at the collar and cuffs. It wasn't fancy. But when Josie put it on the night of the dance and looked at herself in the small mirror in her room, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy. She looked like someone who belonged. Miss Josie! Ruth appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. You look like a princess. I do not. You do, like the princesses in the stories Mama used to tell. Ruth crossed the room and took Josie's hand. Will you dance with Papa? I don't know how to dance. Papa will teach you. He taught Mama. She told me once. Ruth's grip tightened. Are you going to marry him? The question stole Josie's breath. Ruth, I want you to. Samuel wants you to, even if he won't say it. Benjamin drew a picture of our whole family, and you were in it. Ruth looked up at her with those solemn gray eyes. Please marry him, Miss Josie. Please be our Mama. Josie knelt down, bringing herself to Ruth's level. Sweetheart, I would never try to replace your Mama. She loved you so much and, I know, but she's gone. Ruth's voice didn't waver. And you're here, and I love you too. Can't I love you both? The tears came before Josie could stop them. She pulled Ruth into her arms and held her tight. This small girl, who'd been silent for 8 months and now spoke truths that grown-ups couldn't manage. Yes, Josie whispered. You can love us both. I promise. The dance was held in the largest barn in Bitter Creek, transformed for the night with lanterns and bunting and a small band playing in the corner. Half the county seemed to have turned out dressed in their finest, ready to forget the cold for a few hours. Josie walked in on Nathaniel's arm and felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Let them look, Nathaniel murmured. Let them see. Mrs. Patterson was the first to approach, beaming like a proud mother. Don't you two look fine, Josie? That dress turned out beautiful. And Nathaniel? She patted his arm. It's good to see you smiling again. Thank you, ma'am. Now go dance, both of you. That's an order. The band struck up a waltz, and Nathaniel led Josie onto the floor. Her heart pounded with nerves. She'd told the truth about not knowing how to dance. But Nathaniel just pulled her close and said, Follow my lead. Trust me. She trusted him. They moved together through the music, awkward at first, then slowly finding their rhythm. Josie stepped on his feet twice and apologized profusely, but Nathaniel just laughed. You're doing fine. Better than fine. I'm terrible at this. You're perfect at this. He spun her gently. You're perfect at everything. Now you're just lying. Never lied to you yet. Don't intend to start. By the third dance, Josie had stopped counting her mistakes. By the fourth, she'd stopped thinking about anything except Nathaniel's hands at her waist, the warmth of his body close to hers, the way his eyes never left her face. People are staring, she murmured. Let them. Delilah Prescott looks like she swallowed a lemon. Good. Maybe it'll sweeten her up. Josie laughed a real laugh, loud and free. Several people turned to look, and she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she didn't care what anyone thought. The music slowed and Nathaniel pulled her closer. I need to tell you something. What? I've been waiting, trying to do this right, trying to give you time, give the children time. His voice dropped low, meant only for her. But I'm tired of waiting, Josie. I'm tired of pretending that you're just the housekeeper, that this is just an arrangement. I want more. I want everything. Nathaniel, marry me. The words hung between them, bright and terrifying and wonderful. Not someday, not when the time is right. Now, as soon as the pastor can do it. His hands tightened at her waist. I love you, Josie Whitmore. I've been in love with you since you stood up off that floor in Thatcher's store and looked your father in the eye. I've been in love with you since you delivered a foal in a blizzard and held my son while he cried. I've been in love with you since... Yes. He stopped. What? Yes. Josie's face was wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, now. Yes, everything. The smile that broke across Nathaniel's face was like sunrise after a long night. He lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle right there in the middle of the dance floor, and she laughed and cried and didn't care that everyone was watching. She said yes. Ruth's voice rang out from somewhere in the crowd. Miss Josie said yes. The room erupted. Mrs. Patterson was crying. Cornelius Thatcher was clapping. Even some of the men who'd known Miriam were smiling, nodding like they approved of their friend's husband finding happiness again. Samuel pushed through the crowd, Benjamin and Ruth at his heels. Is it true? Are you really getting married? It's true. Nathaniel set Josie down, but kept his arm around her waist. If you children are all right with it. Samuel looked at Josie. For a long moment, his face was unreadable. Then he stuck out his hand. Welcome to the family, Miss Josie. Josie took his hand and shook it solemnly. Then she pulled him into a hug that made him squawk with protest, but not quite pull away. Get off me, he muttered. But he was smiling. Benjamin hugged her next, then Ruth, and then somehow all four of them were tangled together while Nathaniel stood back and watched with wet eyes. This calls for a celebration, someone shouted. Drinks all around, all. The party swelled to twice its previous size. People Josie had never met came to shake her hand and offer congratulations. The band played faster. The dancing grew wilder. And through it all, Josie kept catching Nathaniel's eye across the room, sharing secret smiles that said more than words ever could. She was happy. Truly, completely happy. Which was, of course, when everything fell apart. Well, well, well. The voice cut through the celebration like a blade. Looks like the whore found herself a buyer after all. The music stopped. Josie turned to find her father standing in the barn doorway, flanked by two men she didn't recognize. Obadiah Whitmore looked worse than she'd ever seen him, clothes hanging off his thin frame, face gaunt and yellowed eyes burning with hatred. Get out. Nathaniel's voice was quiet, dangerous. Can't do that, Calloway. Got business here. Obadiah took a step forward, and the crowd parted like water around a stone. See, I've been thinking. My daughter runs off with some stranger, leaves her mother to die, and now she's getting married, living in a big house, wearing fancy dresses. He laughed ugly and mean. That don't seem right. That don't seem fair at all. I said get out. Not until I get what's owed me. Obadiah's eyes fixed on Josie. You owe me, girl. 19 years I fed you, clothed you, kept you alive. And what do I get? Nothing, not a damn thing. You got exactly what you deserved. Josie was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. You got to watch me walk away. Walk away. Obadiah's face twisted. You didn't walk away. You were bought, just like I always said. Calloway paid for you, and now he's collecting his investment. Everybody knows it. Everybody. That's enough. Samuel stepped forward, putting himself between Josie and her father. 13 years old, barely coming up to Obadiah's shoulder, but his jaw was set with the same stubborn determination Josie had come to know so well. You don't get to talk to her like that, Samuel said. Not here, not anywhere. Step aside, boy. This ain't your concern. She's going to be my mother. That makes it my concern. Your mother, Obadiah laughed. She ain't nobody's mother. She ain't nothing but a... Samuel's fist connected with Obadiah's jaw. It wasn't a hard punch. Samuel was still a child, still growing into his strength. But it was enough to make Obadiah stagger, enough to make his eyes go wide with shock. You little... Touch my son and I'll kill you. Nathaniel's voice was ice. He'd moved forward without Josie noticing, putting himself beside Samuel, his whole body coiled with barely contained violence. "This is my family," Nathaniel continued. "Josie is going to be my wife. These are going to be her children. And you are never going to touch any of them. Do you understand me? You threatening me, Calloway. I'm making you a promise." The two men who'd come with Obadiah shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a big fellow with a scarred face, cleared his throat. "Whitmore, maybe we should go. This ain't worth—" "Shut up!" Obadiah's eyes never left Nathaniel. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Think you're some kind of hero, saving the poor girl from her terrible father? I don't think anything. I know what I saw. You tried to sell your daughter for whiskey. I was making a trade, a fair trade. She wasn't worth more than that." "Papa." Everyone turned. Ruth had stepped forward, her small hand clutching Benjamin's sleeve. Her gray eyes were fixed on Obadiah with an intensity that seemed too old for her 6 years. "You're mean," she said quietly. "You're mean and you're wrong, and I don't like you." Obadiah stared at her. "What did you say to me?" "Miss Josie is nice. She braids my hair and reads me stories and makes the bad dreams go away. She's worth $100 billion. Ruth's chin lifted. "You're worth nothing." The silence that followed was absolute. Then slowly, other voices joined in. "The girl's right," Cornelius Thatcher said. "You ain't worth the space you're taking up, Whitmore." "Been a long time coming," someone else muttered. "Should have run him out years ago. Josie's good people, better than you ever deserved." The tide was turning. Josie could feel it, the whole room shifting, solidarity building like a wave about to break. People who'd been silent for years were finally speaking. People who'd looked the other way were finally looking straight. "Get out, Obadiah." Deputy Carson stepped forward, his badge catching the lantern light. "I'm giving you one chance. Walk out that door and don't come back, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace and anything else I can make stick." "You can't. Try me." Obadiah's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Josie thought he might actually swing at someone, at Carson, at Nathaniel, at anyone within reach. Instead, he turned to her. "This ain't over, girl. You think you've won? You think you're free?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You'll never be free of me. I made you. I own you. And no matter how far you run, no matter who you marry, you'll always be Obadiah Whitmore's worthless daughter." Josie looked at this man who'd hurt her for so long. This man who'd tried to sell her like livestock. This man who'd made her believe she was worth nothing. "No," she said quietly. "What?" "I said no." She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. "You don't own me. You never did. You were just the man who raised me, and you did a terrible job of it. But that's on you, Pa. That's your failure, not mine. You ungrateful—" "I'm grateful for plenty of things. For Nathaniel, who showed me what a real man looks like. For these children who taught me what love looks like. For this town, which finally decided to see me as a person instead of a problem." She stepped closer, and this time Obadiah was the one who flinched. "But I will never, not for 1 second, be grateful to you. Josie. My name is Clara Josephine Whitmore. Soon it's going to be Clara Josephine Calloway. And you don't get to call me anything at all because you're not my father anymore." Her voice didn't waver. "You're just a sad, broken man who threw away everything that mattered for the bottom of a bottle. And I pity you." Obadiah's mouth worked, but no sound came out. "Get him out of here," Nathaniel said quietly. Deputy Carson and 2 other men stepped forward, taking Obadiah's arms and steering him toward the door. He didn't fight. The rage had gone out of him, replaced by something that looked almost like bewilderment. Like he couldn't understand how he'd lost control so completely. At the door, he looked back one last time. "You'll regret this," he said, but his voice had no force behind it. "You'll all regret this." The door closed behind him. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Ruth's voice piped up. "Can we have cake now?" The laughter that followed broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. The band started up again. Drinks were poured, and slowly, gradually, the celebration resumed. Not quite as wild as before, but with an undercurrent of triumph that hadn't been there earlier. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel was beside her, his hand warm on her back. "I am." And Josie realized with some surprise that it was true. "I think I'm finally all right." "You were magnificent." "I was terrified." "Same thing sometimes." He pulled her close. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too." She laughed a little shakily. "Is that strange?" "No, it's exactly right." They danced again after that slow dances, fast dances, where the children joined in and made everyone laugh. Samuel spun Ruth in circles until she shrieked with delight. Benjamin taught Josie a jig his mother used to do. And through it all, Nathaniel watched with those gray eyes that said more than words ever could. The party wound down close to midnight. Families began drifting toward their wagons, calling sleepy goodnights, promising to see each other at church. The Calloway children were half asleep on their feet, Ruth already dozing in Nathaniel's arms. "Let's go home," he said quietly. Home. The word wrapped around Josie like a warm blanket. They loaded into the wagon, children in the back, Nathaniel and Josie on the bench seat. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like promises. "Thank you," Josie said as they pulled away from town. "For what?" "For everything. For saving me. For believing in me. For," she struggled to find the words, "for making me feel like I'm worth something." Nathaniel didn't answer right away, just reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You were always worth something," he said finally. "I just helped you see it." "That's still a lot." "It was easy. You made it easy." He glanced at her, and even in the darkness, she could see him smile. "Now we just have to plan a wedding. Soon. Soon as the pastor can manage it. Unless you want something fancy." "I don't want fancy. I want real." She squeezed his hand. "I want you and the children and a future. That's all I've ever wanted." "Then that's what you'll have." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I promise you, Josie, from now until forever, you'll have everything you deserve." They rode home under the stars, two broken people who'd found their way back to whole. Behind them, the children slept. Ahead of them, the future waited, uncertain, yes, but bright with possibility. Josie leaned her head against Nathaniel's shoulder and closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. The wedding was set for the last Sunday in February. Josie had wanted something small, just family and a few close friends. But word spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire, and by the time the day arrived, half the county had found excuses to be at the church. "You can't stop people from wanting to see a happy ending," Mrs. Patterson said as she helped Josie into her wedding dress. "Lord knows we don't get enough of them out here." The dress was simple but beautiful white cotton with lace at the bodice sewn by Mrs. Patterson's own hands. Josie had protested that white was for first-time brides for women without pasts, but Mrs. Patterson had waved her off. "White's for new beginnings, and that's exactly what you're getting." Ruth appeared in the doorway, practically bouncing with excitement. Miss Josie Papa's pacing back and forth, and Samuel says he's going to wear a hole in the floor. "Tell him I'm almost ready." "Are you nervous?" Josie looked at herself in the mirror, at the woman she'd become so different from the girl who'd knelt on Thatcher's floor 3 months ago. "A little." "Don't be." Ruth crossed the room and took her hand. "Papa loves you. We all love you. Everything's going to be perfect." "When did you get so wise?" "I learned it from you." The tears that sprang to Josie's eyes threatened to ruin all of Mrs. Patterson's careful work. She blinked them back and squeezed Ruth's hand. "I love you too, sweetheart. All of you." "I know." Ruth grinned. "Now come on. Papa's waiting." The walk to the church felt like a dream. People lined the path calling out congratulations and well wishes. Children threw flower petals in her path. The sun shone warm despite the February chill, as if even the weather had decided to celebrate. And then she was at the church door, and Benjamin was there to meet her. "I'm supposed to walk you down the aisle," he said, his young face serious. "Papa said, since you don't have anyone else, I should do it. Is that okay?" Josie's heart clenched. "That's more than okay. That's perfect." Benjamin offered his arm with all the gravity of a much older man. Together they walked through the doors and into the church. Nathaniel stood at the altar, and the moment he saw her, his face transformed. All the hard lines softened. All the grief that had lived in his eyes for so long gave way to something else, something bright and fierce and full of hope. "You're beautiful," he mouthed. Josie couldn't answer. Her throat was too tight. The ceremony passed in a blur of words and vows and promises. Josie heard herself speak, heard Nathaniel's voice steady and sure beside her, heard the pastor pronounce them man and wife. But mostly, she just felt Nathaniel's hands holding hers, felt the children watching from the front pew, felt the weight of the ring sliding onto her finger. "You may kiss the bride." Nathaniel pulled her close and kissed her gently, tenderly, like she was something precious. The church erupted in cheers and applause. Ruth was jumping up and down. Benjamin was grinning from ear to ear. Even Samuel was clapping, a genuine smile on his face for the first time in months. "Hello, Mrs. Calloway," Nathaniel murmured against her lips. "Hello, Mr. Calloway. Ready to go home?" Josie looked at the man she'd married, at the children who were now officially hers, at the future stretching out before them like an open road. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The reception was held at the ranch, food and music and dancing that went on until well past dark. Everyone came. Mrs. Patterson and Cornelius Thatcher, Deputy Carson and his wife, the pastor and his family. Neighbors Josie had never met, all of them eager to welcome her into the community. "You've done something remarkable here," the pastor's wife told her as they watched the children play. "These little ones, they were ghosts when Miriam died. Now look at them." Josie watched Ruth chase Benjamin across the yard, shrieking with laughter. Watched Samuel try to teach some younger boys how to throw a lasso. Watched Nathaniel move through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, his eyes always finding their way back to her. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just loved them. That's the most special thing there is." As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift away, Josie found herself standing on the porch watching the stars emerge one by one. The same stars she'd watched from her mother's shack, dreaming of a different life. The same stars that had witnessed her lowest moment and her highest. "Penny for your thoughts." She turned to find Samuel beside her, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Just thinking about how much has changed." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For being such a horse's rear when you first got here." He scuffed his foot against the porch. "I was scared. Scared you'd try to make us forget Mama. Scared Papa would love you more than he loved her. Scared that if I let myself care about you, you'd leave too." "That's a lot to be scared of." "I know." He looked at her then, and Josie saw how much he'd grown in just 3 months. Not just taller, but older somehow, more sure of himself. "But you didn't try to replace Mama. You just added to us. Made us more instead of less. And I'm grateful. Samuel, I want to call you Ma." The words came out in a rush. "Not Mama, that's for her, and I'll never stop calling her that. But Ma. Would that be okay?" Josie's eyes filled with tears. "That would be more than okay." "Good." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not good at this mushy stuff. You're doing just fine. Don't tell Benjamin I said any of this. He'll never let me live it down." Josie laughed and pulled him into a hug. This time he didn't squawk or pull away. He just hugged her back, this boy who'd lost his mother and learned to trust again. "Thank you," she whispered. For what? For giving me a chance. Thank you for not giving up on us. He stepped back, embarrassed now. I'm gonna go help clean up. He disappeared into the house, and Josie stood alone on the porch, her heart so full it hurt. He called you Ma. Nathaniel's voice came from the shadows. He stepped into the light, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. You heard that. Every word. He handed her a cup and stood beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. Miriam would be proud of him, proud of all of them. I hope so. I know so. He took a sip of coffee. I've been thinking. Dangerous pastime. He smiled. About the future, about what comes next. What comes next? More of this, I hope. More children laughing, more family dinners, more nights on this porch watching the stars come out. He turned to face her. I want to build something with you, Josie. Something that lasts. Something we can be proud of. I want that too. Good. He kissed her forehead gently. Because I'm planning on keeping you around for a very long time, Mrs. Calloway. How long? Forever. At least. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Josie's life. She learned what it meant to be a mother, not the kind who gave birth, but the kind who stayed, who bandaged scraped knees and settled arguments, who helped with homework and told bedtime stories, who loved without conditions and forgave without keeping score. Ruth took to calling her mama almost immediately. Benjamin followed suit within a week, and Samuel stubborn proud. Samuel said Ma like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're spoiling them, Nathaniel observed one evening, watching Josie read to Ruth while Benjamin drew at the table and Samuel pretended not to listen from his chair by the fire. Am I? Absolutely. They've never had it so good. Then I guess I'll just have to spoil you too. I'm not complaining. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, melting the snow and turning the world green again. Josie planted a garden behind the house, vegetables and herbs and flowers, just like her mother used to grow. She thought about her mother often now, but the grief had softened into something gentler, something that felt more like gratitude than pain. She'd be proud of you, Nathaniel said one afternoon, watching Josie work in the dirt. Your mother. You think so? I know so. You did exactly what she wanted. Built a life. Found your worth. Became the woman she always knew you could be. Josie wiped her hands on her apron and looked at her husband. This man who'd saved her and loved her and given her everything she'd never dared to hope for. I had help. You had courage. That's different. Same thing sometimes. He smiled. That's my line. The news about Obadiah came in late April. Deputy Carson rode out to the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon, his face grave. Josie saw him coming and felt her stomach drop. Mrs. Calloway? Mr. Calloway. Deputy. Nathaniel stepped forward. What brings you out here? I've got news. About your father, ma'am. Carson removed his hat. He was found dead 3 days ago, froze to death in an alley behind the saloon in Cheyenne. They said he'd been drinking heavily. Just went to sleep and didn't wake up. Josie waited for something, grief, relief, anger. Instead, there was just nothing. An empty space where her father used to live. I see, she said quietly. I'm sorry to bring you this news. Don't be. She met Carson's eyes. He made his choices. He lived with them. And now? She paused. Now it's over. You want us to make any arrangements? No. Let him be buried where he died. He didn't want to be a father. I don't need to be a daughter. Carson nodded, understanding more than he said. I'll let you know if there's anything else. After he left, Nathaniel took her hand. Are you all right? Josie thought about it. Really thought about it. Her father was dead. The man who'd raised her hurt her, tried to sell her. The man who'd made her believe she was worthless. Yes, she said finally. I am. You don't have to pretend with me. I'm not pretending. She turned to face him. I grieved for my father a long time ago, grieved for the man he used to be before the whiskey took him. This is just an ending, and I'm ready for it to be over. You're sure? I'm sure. She squeezed his hand. I've got too much to live for to spend any more time mourning someone who never really lived at all. That night, after the children were in bed, Josie sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to anyone living, just to herself, to the girl she used to be. Dear Josie, I know you're scared. I know you think you're worthless. I know your father's voice is the loudest one in your head, telling you you'll never amount to anything. But I'm writing to tell you that he's wrong. He's been wrong all along. You're going to survive. You're going to find a man who loves you without conditions. You're going to raise 3 children who think you hung the moon. You're going to build a life so full of love and laughter that you'll forget what emptiness feels like. You're worth more than a sack of flour. More than whiskey. More than any price anyone could ever name. You're worth everything. Just wait. You'll see. Love. The woman you're going to become. She folded the letter and tucked it into her Bible, where she kept her mother's last words and a pressed wildflower from her wedding day. Mementos of the journey that had brought her here. Writing love letters without me. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, a teasing smile on his face. Just making peace with the past. Find it. I think I always had it. I just needed help seeing it. He crossed the room and pulled her to her feet. Come to bed, it's late. In a minute. She walked to the window and looked out at the ranch, at the barn where she'd delivered a foal, at the garden, where her mother's spirit lived, at the house where 3 children were sleeping safe and warm. This was her life now. Not the one she'd been born into, but the one she'd built, choice by choice, day by day, love by love. Josie. Nathaniel's voice was soft. What are you thinking about? About how far I've come. About how much I have. About... She turned to face him. About how grateful I am that you walked into Thatcher's store that day. I'm the grateful one. We can both be grateful. Fair enough. He held out his hand. Now will you please come to bed? She took his hand and let him lead her upstairs. Let him hold her in the darkness. Let herself fall asleep in the arms of the man who'd shown her what she was worth. The summer brought new challenges and new joys. Ruth lost her first tooth and wanted to show everyone in town. Benjamin won a prize at the county fair for his drawings. Samuel started helping with the horse training, and Nathaniel swore he had a natural gift. And Josie discovered she was going to have a baby. She'd suspected for weeks, but hadn't said anything, afraid to hope, afraid to believe that life could keep getting better. But when the doctor confirmed it, she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. Nathaniel. She found him in the barn, brushing down his favorite mare. I need to tell you something. He looked up, immediately alert. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She stepped closer, took his hands. Everything's right. Everything's perfect. Josie, you're scaring me. I'm pregnant. The brush clattered to the ground. Nathaniel stared at her, his gray eyes wide with shock. Then something broke open in his face, something raw and beautiful and full of wonder. You're sure? I'm sure. We're going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby. He swept her into his arms and held her tight, his whole body shaking. When he pulled back, his face was wet with tears. I didn't think... His voice cracked. After Miriam, after the baby we lost, I didn't think I'd ever... I know. She cupped his face in her hands. But life surprises us sometimes, in the best ways. I love you. He kissed her deep and fierce. I love you so much, Josie Calloway. I love you too. They told the children that night at dinner. Ruth screamed with excitement and demanded to know if she was getting a brother or a sister. Benjamin wanted to draw pictures of the baby. And Samuel. Samuel just looked at Josie with those eyes that had seen too much loss and not enough hope. "A baby," he said quietly. "A baby." "Are you scared?" Josie thought about his mother, who died bringing his youngest sibling into the world. Thought about the fear that must be living in his heart right now, the memories he couldn't escape. "A little," she admitted. "But I'm also happy, and hopeful, and grateful. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll face it together, as a family." She reached across the table and took his hand. "But I need you to know something, Samuel. No matter what happens to me, to the baby, to any of us, you are loved. You will always be loved. Nothing can change that." Samuel's jaw trembled. Then he nodded once, sharp and quick, and looked away. But he didn't let go of her hand. The baby came in early spring when the world was waking up and everything smelled like new beginnings. It was a girl. They named her Margaret after Josie's mother. Little Maggie, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She was born healthy and strong, screaming her way into the world like she had something to prove. "She's perfect," Nathaniel whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "Absolutely perfect." "She is." Josie lay back against the pillows, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. "Bring her here." He placed Maggie in her arms, and Josie looked down at this tiny miracle, this life she'd helped create. Her daughter, her flesh and blood, her future. "Hello, sweet girl," she murmured. "Welcome to the family." The door creaked open. 3 faces peered through the crack, Ruth bouncing with excitement. Benjamin wide-eyed with curiosity. Samuel trying to look casual and failing completely. "Can we see her?" Ruth asked. "Come in, all of you." They crowded around the bed, jostling for position. Ruth reached out one small finger to touch the baby's cheek. "She's so tiny." "She'll grow." "Will she like me?" "She'll love you." Josie smiled at each of them in turn. "She'll love all of you. She's the luckiest baby in Wyoming, having 3 big brothers and sisters to look after her." "2 brothers and a sister," Samuel corrected. "Right, 2 brothers and a sister." Josie caught his eye. "And the best parents anyone could ask for." Samuel flushed, but didn't look away. "Yeah, I guess she is pretty lucky." Later, after the children had been sent to bed and the house had gone quiet, Josie sat in the rocking chair by the window, Maggie sleeping peacefully in her arms. Nathaniel sat across from her, just watching. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "About how full this house is now, full of noise and chaos and love." He shook his head in wonder. "A year ago I was alone with 3 grieving children and no hope. Now look at us." "Look at us," Josie agreed. "You did this, you know. We did this, together." "No." He stood and crossed to her, kneeling beside the rocking chair. "You walked into our lives and changed everything. You made Samuel smile again. You gave Ruth her voice. You showed Benjamin that art matters. And you," he touched her cheek gently, "you showed me that my heart could still love." Nathaniel. "I know your father told you that you were worthless. I know he made you believe you weren't worth more than a sack of flour." His gray eyes held hers, fierce with conviction. "But he was wrong, Josie. He was wrong about everything. You're worth more than gold, more than this ranch, more than anything I could ever give you. You've given me everything. I've given you a home, a family, a chance." He kissed her forehead. "But you gave me something to live for." Josie felt the tears sliding down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. These weren't tears of grief or fear. They were tears of joy, pure, overwhelming, impossible joy. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he smiled. "Now and forever. Now and forever." The years that followed were everything Josie had dreamed of, and more. She watched her children grow Ruth into a young woman of startling beauty and fierce intelligence. Benjamin into an artist whose paintings hung in galleries as far away as San Francisco. Samuel into a rancher every bit as skilled as his father with a family of his own. And Maggie, little Maggie, grew into a force of nature stubborn and strong and absolutely certain of her own worth. Where'd she get that from? Nathaniel wondered aloud one day watching his youngest daughter negotiate a higher allowance with the precision of a lawyer. "I have no idea," Josie said innocently. "Liar." Maybe. They grew old together on that ranch in Wyoming, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and more love than one house could hold. They buried friends and welcomed new ones. They weathered storms and celebrated victories. They built something that would last long after they were gone. And every night before they went to sleep, Nathaniel would take Josie's hand and tell her what she was worth. Not in words, though there were plenty of those, but in the way he looked at her, the way he held her, the way he'd chosen her day after day after day for more than 50 years. On their last night together, when they were both old and gray and ready for whatever came next, Josie lay in her husband's arms and thought about the girl she used to be, the girl who'd knelt on a cold wooden floor being traded like livestock, the girl who'd believed she was worthless. "I proved him wrong," she whispered. "Who?" "My father. Everyone who ever looked at me and saw nothing." She turned her head to look at Nathaniel, her husband, her partner, her forever. "I proved them all wrong." "You did more than that." He kissed her forehead one last time. "You showed them what worth really means." Josie smiled, closed her eyes, let the peace wash over her. She'd been sold for a sack of flour at 19. But she'd lived like she was worth the world. And she was. She always had been. Worth is not given. Worth is not bought. Worth is not measured in flour or gold or the opinions of broken men. Worth is built one choice at a time, one love at a time, one brave step forward at a time. And no one can ever take it away.